Hey there, and welcome back to, let's see, what are we calling this? Pandemic Paradise Lost? I don't know. Alliteration works for me. It is Tuesday, April 21st, the 44th or 45th day of the pandemic, and the 21st day of National Poetry Month, which means we are a third of the way through Book 9, ratcheting right up to the, I don't know, I don't want to call it the climax. The moment, well, whatever, where Eve makes a decision, Adam makes a decision, the moment we've all been waiting for, dreading, anticipating, all of the above. Anyway, right. As you were listening to the last bit, I hope you were hearing echoes of God's explanation of his sort of power that he gave humanity and where he sort of draws a line of his responsibility for humankind's actions. Adam had very clearly internalized all of that. I don't even know if internalize is the right word, because if you're created like in God's image, I'm not sure that there was a lot of agency on Adam's part that the word internalize implies. At any rate, Eve was not. And she, I don't know if it's consequently, she doesn't mimic or parrot the version of godly empowerment of humanity, and instead sort of sees this as an opportunity to test God herself. Like, God shouldn't have created a version of paradise that could hold within it the destruction of God's creation. Like, God wouldn't have done that, would he? He shouldn't have. Let's see. God says he gave us free will. And in this moment, it does really feel a little bit, this moment of their conversation does feel a little bit like echoes of God and echoes of Satan. God wouldn't have given me like a defective loyalty to him and defective free will. He wouldn't have created me that way. They agree on that. Adam doesn't want to tempt. Adam seems less sure of her and of the safety and security of the system that they are part of. At any rate, you listened, you know. But I love these moments in this text where you have characters reflecting on the nature of their own being and the nature of their own existence. Where does the extent of, like, where does it reach? Like, where does their power reach? Like, what is the extent of their power? And how does that fit into the structure that surrounds them? Like, what is the shape of that structure, and where are their obligations? And yeah, that's a really big question. I'm going to stop preambling now and instead just jump in and start reading at line 376 and read until line 778. So here we go. Book 9, 376. So spake the patriarch of mankind, but Eve persisted, yet submiss, though last, replied. With thy permission then, and thus forewarned, chiefly by what thy own last reasoning words touched only, that our trial, when least sought, may find us both perhaps far less prepared, the willinger I go, nor much expect a foe so proud will first the weaker seek. So bent, the more shall shame him his repulse. Thus saying, from her husband's hand, her hand soft she withdrew. And like a wood nymph light, Oread or Dryad, or of Delia's train, betook her to the groves. But Delia's self in gait surpassed, and goddess-like deport, though not as she with bow and quiver armed, but with such gardening tools as art yet rude, guiltless of fire, had formed, or angels brought. To Pales or Pomona thus adorned, likest she seemed, Pomona when she fled Vertumnus, or to Ceres in her prime, yet virgin of Proserpina from Jove. Her long with ardent look his eye pursued, delighted, but desiring more her stay. Oft he to her his charge of quick return repeated, she to him as oft engaged to be returned by noon amid the bower, and all things in best order to invite noontide repast or afternoon's repose. Oh, much deceived, much failing, hapless Eve, of thy presumed return, event perverse, thou never from that hour in paradise foundest either sweet repast or sound repose. Such ambush hid among sweet flowers and shades, waited with hellish rancor imminent to intercept thy way, or send thee back despoiled of innocence, of faith, of bliss. For now, and since first break of dawn, the fiend, mere serpent in appearance, forth was come, and on his quest, where likeliest he might find the only two of mankind, but in them the whole included race, his purpose prey. In bower and field he sought, where any tuft of grove or garden plot more pleasant lay, their tendance or plantation for delight, by fountain or by shady rivulet, he sought them both. But wished his hap might find Eve separate, he wished, but not with hope of what so seldom chanced, when to his wish, beyond his hope, Eve separate he spies, veiled in a cloud of fragrance, where she stood half spied, so thick the roses bushing round about her glowed, oft stooping to support each flower of slender stalk, whose head, though gay carnation, purple, azure, or speckled with gold, hung drooping, unsustained. Them she upstays gently with myrtle band, mindless the while, herself the fairest unsupported flower, from her best prop so far, and stormed so nigh. Nearer he drew, and many a walk traversed of stateliest covert, cedar, pine, or palm, then voluble and bold, now hid, now seen among thick-woven arborets and flowers, embroidered on each bank the hand of Eve. Spot more delicious than those gardens feigned, or of revived Adonis, or renowned Alcinous, host of old Laertes' son, or that, not mystic, where the sapient king held dalliance with his fair Egyptian spouse. Much he the place admired, person more, as one who long in populous city pent, where houses thick and sewers annoy the air, forth issuing on a summer's morn to breathe among the pleasant villages and farms adjoined. From each thing met conceives delight, the smell of grain, or tedded grass, or kine, or dairy, each rural sight, each rural sound. If chance with nymph-like step fair virgin passed, what pleasing seemed, for her now pleases more, she most, and in her look sums all delight. Such pleasure took the serpent to behold this flowery plat, the sweet recess of Eve, thus early, thus alone. Her heavenly form angelic, but more soft and feminine. Her graceful innocence, her every air of gesture or least action overawed his malice, and with rapine sweet bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought. That space the evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good, of enmity disarmed, of guile, of hate, of envy, of revenge. But the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects, and all his thoughts of mischief, gratulating, thus excites. Thoughts, whither have ye led me with what sweet compulsion thus transported to forget what hither brought us? Hate, not love, nor hope of paradise for hell, hope here to taste of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy, save what is in destroying other joy to me is lost. Then let me not let pass occasion which now smiles. Behold alone with woman, opportune to all attempts, her husband for I view far round, not nigh, whose higher intellectual more I shun, and strength of courage haughty and of limb heroic built, though of terrestrial mold. Foe not informidable, exempt from wound, I not. So much hath hell debased and pain enfeebled me to what I was in heaven. She fair, divinely fair, fit love for gods, not terrible, though terror be in love and beauty, not approached by stronger hate, hate stronger, under show of love well feigned, the way which to her ruin now I tend. So spake the enemy of mankind, enclosed in serpent, inmate bad, and toward Eve addressed this way, not with indented wave prone to the ground as sense, but on his rear, circular base of rising folds that towered, Fold above fold, a surging maze, his head crested aloft, and carbuncle his eyes, with burnished neck of verdant gold, erect amidst his circling spires, that on the grass floated redundant. Pleasing was his shape, and lovely, never since of serpent kind lovelier, not those that in Illyria changed Hermione and Cadmus, or the god in Epidaurus, nor to which transformed Ammonian Jove or Capitoline was seen, he with Olympias. This with her who bore Scipio, the height of Rome, with tract oblique at first, as one who sought access, but fearing to interrupt, sidelong he works his way, as when a ship by skillful steersmen wrought nigh river's mouth or foreland, where the wind veers oft, as oft so steers and shifts her sail, so varied he, and of his tortuous train curled many a wanton wreath in sight of Eve, to lure her eye. She busied, heard the sound of rustling leaves, but minded not, as used to such sport before her through the field, from every beast, more duteous at her call, than at Circean call the herd disguised. He bolder now, uncalled before her stood, but as in gaze admiring, oft he bowed his turret crest, and sleek enameled neck fawning, and licked the ground whereon she trod. His gentle dumb expression turned at length the eye of Eve to mark his play. He glad of her attention gained, with serpent tongue organic, or impulse of vocal air, his fraudulent temptation thus begun. Wonder not, sovereign mistress, if perhaps thou canst, who art sole wonder, much less arm thy looks, the heaven of mildness, with disdain, displeased that I approach thee thus, and gaze insatiate. I thus single, nor have feared thy awful brow, more awful thus retired. Fairest resemblance of thy maker fair, thee all things living gaze on, all things thine by gift, and thy celestial beauty adore with ravishment, beheld. There best beheld, where universally admired. But here in this enclosure wild, these beasts among, beholders rude and shallow to discern half what in thee is fair, one man except. Who sees thee? And what is one? Who shouldst be seen a goddess among gods, adored and served by angels numberless thy daily train. So glozed the tempter, and his proem tuned. Into the heart of Eve his words made way, though at the voice much marveling. At length, not unamazed, she thus in answer spake. What may this mean? Language of man pronounced by tongue of brute, and human sense expressed. The first, at least, of these I thought denied to beast, whom God on their creation day created mute to all articulate sound. The latter I demur, for in their looks much reason, and in their actions oft appears. Thee, serpent, subtlest beast of all the field I knew, but not with human voice endued. Redouble then this miracle, and say how camest thou speakable of mute, and how to me so friendly grown above the rest of brutal kind, that daily are in sight. Say, for such wonder claims attention due. To whom the guileful tempter thus replied, Empress of this fair world, resplendent Eve, easy to me it is to tell thee all what thou commandest, and right thou shouldst be obeyed. I was at first as other beasts that graze the trodden herb, of abject thoughts and low, as was my food, nor aught but food it discerned or sex, and apprehended nothing high. Till on a day roving the field, I chanced a goodly tree far distant to behold loaden with fruit of fairest colors mixed, ruddy and gold. I nearer drew to gaze, when from the boughs a savory odor blown, grateful to appetite, more pleased my sense than smell of sweetest fennel, or the teats of ewe or goat dropping with milk at even, unsucked of lamb or kid that tended their play. To satisfy the sharp desire I had of tasting those fair apples, I resolved not to defer. Hunger and thirst at once, powerful persuaders, quickened at the scent of that alluring fruit, urged me so keen. About the mossy trunk I wound me soon, for high from ground the branches would require thy utmost reach or atoms. Round the tree all other beasts that saw with like desire, longing and envying stood, but could not reach. Amid the tree now got, where plenty hung, tempting so nigh, to pluck and eat my fill I spared not, for such pleasure till that hour at feed or fountain never had I found. Sated at length, Ere long I might receive or perceive strange alteration in me, to degree of reason in my inward powers, and speech wanted not long, though to the shape retained. Thenceforth to speculations high or deep I turned my thoughts, and with capacious mind considered all things visible in heaven or earth or middle, all things fair and good. But all that fair and good in thy divine semblance, and in thy beauty's heavenly ray, united I beheld. No fair to thine equivalent or second, which compelled me thus, though importune, perhaps, to come and gaze and worship thee of right, declared sovereign of creatures, universal Dame. So talked the spirited sly snake, and Eve, yet more amazed, unwary, thus replied, Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit, in thee first proved. But say, where grows the tree? From hence how far? For many are the trees of God that grow in paradise, and various, yet unknown to us. In such abundance lies our choice, as leaves a greater store of fruit untouched, still hanging uncorruptible, till men grow up to their provision, and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. To whom the wily adder, blithe and glad, Empress, the way is ready, and not long. Beyond a row of myrtles on a flat, fast by a fountain, one small thicket past of glowing myrrh and balm. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither soon. Lead then, said Eve. He, leading swiftly, rolled in tangles and made intricate seams straight, to mischief swift. Hope elevates, and joy brightens his crest, as when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapor, which the night condenses, and the old environs round, kindled through agitation to a flame, which oft, they say, some evil spirit attends, hovering and blazing with delusive light, misleads the amazed night wanderer from his way to bogs and mires, and off through pond or pool, there swallowed up and lost from suck or fall. So blistered the dire snake, and into fraud led Eve, our credulous mother, to the tree of prohibition, root of all our woe, which when she saw, thus to her guide she spake, Serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rests with thee, wondrous indeed, if cause of such effects, but of this tree we may not touch nor taste. God so commanded, and left that command sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live, law to ourselves. Our reason is our law. To whom the tempter guilefully replied, Indeed. Hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat, yet Lords declared of all on earth, in earth or air? To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye touch it, lest ye die. She scarce had said, though brief, when now more bold the tempter, but with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new part puts on, and as to passion moved, fluctuates disturbed, yet comely, and in act raised, as of some great matter to begin. As when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected, while each part, motion, each act, one audience, ere the tongue sometimes in height began, as no delay of preface, brooking through his zeal of right. So standing, moving, or to height upgrown, the tempter, all impassioned, thus began. O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit? It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener? Look on me who have touched and tasted, yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man, which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil? Of good, how just? Of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? God therefore cannot hurt ye and be just. Not just, not God. Not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbid? Why but to awe? Why but to keep ye low and ignorant, his worshippers? He knows that in the day you eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear, yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil as they know. That ye should be as gods, since I as man, internal man, is but proportion meet. I of brute human, ye of human gods. So ye shall die, perhaps, by putting off human to put on gods, death to be wished, though threatened, which no worse than this can bring. And what are gods that man may not become as they, participating godlike food? The gods are first, and that advantage use on our belief, that all from them proceeds. I question it, for this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind, them nothing. If they all things, who enclose knowledge of good and evil in this tree, and whoso eats thereof, forthwith attains wisdom without their leave? And wherein lies the offense that man should thus attain to know? What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy? And can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These and many more causes import your need of this fair fruit. Goddess humane, reach then, and freely taste. He ended, and his words, replete with guile, into her art, too easy entrance won. Fixed on the fruit she gazed, which to behold might tempt alone, and in her ears the sound yet rung of his persuasive words, impregned with reason to her seeming, and with truth. Meanwhile the hour of noon drew on, and waked an eager appetite, raised by the smell of so savory of that fruit, which with desire inclinable, now grown to touch or taste, solicited her longing, eye. Yet first pausing a while, thus to herself she mused. Great are thy virtues, doubtless, best of fruits, though kept from man and worthy to be admired, whose taste too long forborne at first essay gave elocution to the mute, and taught the tongue not made for speech to speak thy praise. Thy praise he also who forbids thy use conceals not from us, naming thee the tree of knowledge, knowledge both of good and evil. Forbids us then to taste, but his forbidding commends thee more, while it infers the good by thee communicated, and our want. For good unknown, sure is not had, or had and yet unknown, is as not had at all. In plain then, what forbids he but to know? Forbids us good, forbids us to be wise. Such prohibitions bind not, but if death binds us with afterbands, what profits then our inward freedom? In the day we eat of this fair fruit, our doom is, we shall die. How dies the serpent? He hath eaten and lives, and knows, and speaks, and reasons, and discerns, irrational till then. For us alone was death invented? Or to us denied this intellectual food, for beasts reserved? For beasts it seems, yet that one beast which first hath tasted envies not, but brings with joy the good befallen him, author unsuspect, friendly to man, far from deceit or guile. What fear I then? Rather what know to fear, under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death, of law or penalty. Here grows the cure of all. This fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste. Of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once, both body and mind? And that's where we will end. The cliffiest of cliffhangers, the hangeriest of cliffhangers. Anyway, we're hanging by a thread. Can't wait to see what happens tomorrow. / am kind of sad about what has, well, what today's installment included. We definitely turned to tragedy. All right. Until tomorrow.